Have you ever had a day where everything simply refuses to work? You ignore a quiet impulse to do something different, and suddenly every task feels like walking through deep water. Traffic is worse, conversations feel forced, nothing aligns. We usually write this off as bad luck, just another difficult day. But have you ever noticed the strange friction that appears the moment you dismiss a spark of genuine excitement? Most of us treat excitement as a simple, unreliable emotion, a fleeting feeling we push aside for what seems logical or necessary. But that heavy, resistant feeling isn't random. It is a symptom. When you ignore that quiet internal pull, you aren't just changing your mood, you are actively altering the trajectory of your reality. We all know the feeling of a perfect day. You make one spontaneous choice, taking a different street, calling an old friend, and suddenly everything aligns. The timing is flawless. Opportunities simply appear. There is no friction. Then there are the other days, the days where every step feels forced and the world seems to be pushing back. We usually blame these sudden shifts on random chance or our own fluctuating mood. But you may have overlooked something subtle operating right beneath the surface of these experiences. The heavy resistance you feel is not a punishment, and that effortless flow is not just a lucky coincidence. They are two sides of the exact same hidden mechanism. Why do certain moments open up so easily, while others drop us into endless exhaustion? Stay with me, because in a moment you will see exactly why this pattern exists and how a deeply misunderstood signal is constantly trying to guide you out of the resistance. Have you noticed how these moments tend to repeat throughout your life? Think about the times when you acted on a sudden, unexplained urge. You felt a quiet spark to go to a specific place, read a certain book, or reach out to an old friend. When you followed it, the timing was uncanny. Everything unfolded effortlessly. One synchronicity locked perfectly into the next. Now think of the exact opposite. You feel that same quiet spark, but you dismiss it. You choose the familiar route, the logical option. Immediately, your environment seems to push back. Delays pile up. Misunderstandings happen. The momentum simply dies. We usually write this off as a string of good days or just random bad luck. But if you step back and observe, this is where the pattern becomes clear. This cycle of flow and friction is not random at all. It happens too often with too much precision to be accidental. And this is where things become interesting. The physical world outside of you is responding directly to whether or not you follow that quiet internal spark. Why do these external shifts perfectly mirror our internal choices? The repetition suggests something much deeper is at play. It points to an invisible rule hiding in plain sight. To understand this invisible rule, we have to look at the very thing we usually ignore, the spark of excitement itself. Most of us are taught to treat excitement as a psychological bonus, a pleasant emotion that happens when things go our way. But this is exactly where the misunderstanding begins. Excitement is not a reaction to your reality, it is a navigational signal. The truth behind this is far simpler than most people expect. This signal has always been there, quietly guiding you, but we overlook it because it feels too ordinary. It acts as a literal compass. When you feel a sudden impulse to take a different route, reach out to someone, or start a new project, that feeling is not a random thought. It is your system recognizing the path of least resistance. It points directly to the timeline most aligned with your true nature. Suddenly, the pattern becomes easier to understand. The heavy friction you feel on those difficult days isn't the world punishing you. It is the physical sensation of moving against your own natural frequency. When you ignore the compass, you are forcing your way into a reality that doesn't fit. But how exactly does a simple feeling determine which events appear in your everyday life? Why does ignoring that quiet impulse create such immediate friction? And why does following it cause the world to open up? The answer lies in a hidden rule governing how we move through time. Every time you make a choice, you are not just altering your current situation. You are shifting into a different parallel version of your reality. This mechanism has been quietly operating in the background of your entire life, steering your everyday moments without you even realizing it. Excitement is not merely a mood. It is the physical translation of a frequency. It is the exact signature of your true self. Think of reality like a radio broadcast. If you want to hear a specific station, you must match its frequency. You cannot dial into 98.1 and expect to hear the music playing on 104.5. Excitement is the tuning dial. When you act on that inner spark, you turn the dial toward the frequency where your life flows naturally. Opportunities appear because you are finally on the channel where they exist. But when you ignore the spark, when you force the logical, uninspired route, you turn the dial away. Suddenly, the pattern makes perfect sense. The exhaustion and resistance you feel on a bad day is simply the sound of static. It is the literal friction of trying to force your way through a timeline you are not tuned to receive. The concept of simply following a frequency seems incredibly straightforward, but in practice, there is a quiet war constantly happening between intuition and logic. We have been deeply conditioned to believe that struggle is a sign of value. We mistake our fear for intelligence, and we often confuse heavy resistance with being a responsible adult. Think about what happens the moment you feel a sudden, unexplained spark to change your routine. Almost instantly, a louder, more familiar voice steps in. That is not practical. You do not have time for that. Stick to the plan. This is exactly where most of us silence the signal. We let our conditioning override our alignment. We turn the dial away from the clear broadcast and back toward the static, convinced that the heavier path is the only realistic way forward. And just like that, the effortless momentum disappears, replaced by the familiar friction of a difficult day. How often do we talk ourselves out of something that simply felt right? How many times has caution hijacked the very frequency trying to guide you? If you have ever felt that quiet pull and immediately convinced yourself to ignore it, share your experience in the comments below. We all fight this same invisible battle. Even though the logical mind will always try to intervene, realigning with your true frequency does not require a massive life overhaul. It only requires a simple, continuous experiment. You do not need to make drastic, terrifying changes today. You only need to follow a very specific navigation method. Look at the options available to you right now. Which one carries slightly more energy? Which one sparks a quiet sense of interest?
Notice that feeling and act on it to the best of your ability. It might be as simple as choosing a different book, taking a walk, or researching a random topic. Follow that thread as far as it can naturally go until you can't take it no further. Then simply drop any attachment to what the final result should be. This is how the signal becomes action. The secret is that this process works best when followed with light curiosity rather than heavy pressure. You do not need to know where the path leads, because the frequency of excitement already contains the entire map. By taking that small, simple step, you are turning the radio dial back to your natural broadcast. If this perspective resonates with you, consider subscribing for more explorations like this. To see how this mechanism operates, you do not need to look for a massive, life-altering event. The change rarely starts with something dramatic. Imagine you are sitting at your desk, struggling to finish a frustrating task. Suddenly, you feel a quiet, unexplained urge to walk to a coffee shop you rarely visit. Your logical mind tells you to stay put and push through the resistance, but this time you follow the pull. While standing in line, you run into an acquaintance who casually mentions a solution to the exact problem you were stuck on. This is often how the shift begins. It was never really about the coffee.
That sudden spark of interest was simply your internal compass detecting the path of least resistance. You have likely experienced moments exactly like this throughout your life, quietly dismissing them later as nothing more than a lucky coincidence. But the signal was there, working exactly as designed. How many times has a tiny, seemingly illogical decision completely changed the direction of your day? When you follow the simple thread of what feels lightest in the moment, you stop fighting the current. You allow the physical world to naturally rearrange itself around your true frequency. When we begin to treat excitement not as a fleeting emotion, but as a literal compass, the entire structure of our experience begins to look different. We spend so much time trying to build the perfect life. We fight against the current, exhausting ourselves to force a specific outcome. But the existence of this navigation signal suggests something remarkable about the nature of reality. It implies that the reality you are trying to create already exists. Every possible version of your life, every parallel timeline, is already fully formed and broadcasting its own unique frequency. You do not have to painstakingly build the path from scratch. You only have to tune your internal dial to match it. The excitement you feel is not just a passing mood. It is the literal echo of that timeline, pulling you toward the version of you that is already living it.
You may already be standing at the threshold of this realization in your own life, feeling the quiet pull of a reality you haven't quite stepped into yet. How different would life feel if you stopped trying to force the destination and simply let the frequency guide you there? We spend so much time trying to think our way into the right future, but the compass we need is not found in heavy logic. It is found in the quiet spark of excitement we so often dismiss. Starting today, you may begin noticing this hidden pattern unfolding around you in entirely new ways. You will recognize the sudden friction when you force a decision and the effortless flow when you follow a simple curiosity. Perhaps this invisible signal has been there all along, patiently waiting for you to tune in. How often have these quiet impulses appeared in your life, only to be drowned out by caution? The timeline you are searching for does not need to be built, it only needs to be tuned into. And if this idea resonates with you, the next video explores something even more fascinating about how these unseen frequencies shape the physical world.